Welcome back. Now, the Hollywood Reporter recently announced their top 25 horror films of this century so far. And yours truly, when taking a look at the list, was shocked to see some of the films on this list. Don't get me wrong, there are films that deserve to be on this list, like Get Out, The Host, Train to Busan, films I haven't seen. They deserve to be on this list. But there are some films that I have no idea why they're on this list. Say like Bones and All, or Presence, the new Steven Soderbergh film that was released earlier this year. Don't get me wrong, good film, but not top 25 level. I'm sorry. You also have other films like Under the Shadow, His House, films I've never heard of before until now, literally. Let me run down the top 25 films of the century in the horror genre according to the Hollywood Reporter that has gotten me so pissed off. Number 25, Bones and All. 24, Talk to Me. 23, A Quiet Place. 22, Under the Shadow. 21, His House. 20, Drag Me to Hell. 19, It Follows. 18, Presence. 17, The Invisible Man. 16, Sinners. 15, Saint Maud. 14, The Others. 13, Nosferatu. 12, Us. 11, The Witch. 10, Hereditary. 9, The Conjuring. 8, Pan's Labyrinth. 7, Train to Busan. 6, 28 Days Later. 5, The Host. 4, The Babadook. 3, Let the Right One In. 2, Get Out. And the number one horror movie of this century, according to the Hollywood Reporter, is, wait for it, Under the Skin. What? The Scarlett Johansson film Under the Skin? Sure, I've seen the film. It's an okay film. But that's the greatest horror movie of this century so far? Are you kidding me? You've gotta be kidding me. Seriously. I can understand putting films like Sinners that came out this year, or Nosferatu, but Under the Skin as the number one film of this century in the horror genre. I'm sorry. I can't go there. I'm just so enraged that yours truly decided to do a top 10 list of my favorite horror films of this century. Because I had to do it. Seriously. Because these idiots at the Hollywood Reporter have no clue what the best horror film of the century is. I'm sorry. Because you got titles there that do not belong there. And you have other films there that should have been there. I'm surprised The Substance isn't on that list. Seriously. Even though it's not on my top 10 list, I would have thought this would be on this list by far. Since we're including 2024, 2025 films. Seriously. It's just unreal. Under the Skin as the number one film. But here is my top 10 films. Every day there's a family struggling with hospital bills to care for their sick child who is fighting an illness. There's a woman who is fighting breast cancer and is having trouble making ends meet while paying for their treatment. And there are burn victims that are going through treatments to heal their deep wounds. There is a charity in the horror community that helps these people. Scares That Care is an organization that helps families deal with the bills for their child. They help women get the treatment they need to fight breast cancer, and they help people who are dealing with severe burns get the help they need to heal. Scares That Care is a 100% volunteer organization and 501c3 nonprofit charity that is dedicated to helping these people in fighting real monsters. To find out more information or to donate to Scares That Care, you can go to www.scaresthatcare.org. Every donation helps Scares That Care fight real monsters. Welcome back. It's that time of the podcast where yours truly talks about the most talked about topic on the podcast. Jason Blum and Blumhouse Productions. That's right. We have a Jason Blum news story that is worthy of a segment. I did not want to do this in the open because, well, this was worthy of a segment. Because this is so ludicrous. Seriously. When I read this was just so ludicrous. And we're talking about the post-mortem of Megan 2.0. Because it crashed and burned at the box office. It was an epic failure. And Jason Blum shared his thoughts recently on that epic failure. I have to admit, he did. He went on a podcast called The Town where he shared his honest thoughts about the failure of this film. Now, before I go into his thoughts, this is my thoughts on why this film failed. Seriously. First of all, Megan 2.0 was not like Megan at all. Seriously. This looked more like a sci-fi action film than a horror film. In Megan, what we liked about Megan was the fact it was a horror film. It had a great moment that went viral. Plus, you also had some bloody scenes in it. In the unrated cut that made the film work and made the film good, quite frankly. Now, I haven't seen Megan 2 yet, as I'm patiently waiting for this film to come on Peacock before I make any judgment because, well, yours truly is not going to spend money on this film because, well, it crashed and burned at the box office. And lately, I cannot trust a Blumhouse film because, let's see. This year, The Wolfman was a 2-star film. Drop, which was produced by Blumhouse, was a 1-star film. And I haven't seen its other release, The Woman in the Yard, yet. But with the way Blumhouse Productions have been going this year, I've just taken a break from watching Jason Blum produced films. Because literally nothing has worked this year from Blumhouse Productions. As I've seen 2 out of the 3 films, and the 2 films have been major disappointments. Because The Wolfman was directed by Leigh Whannell, and Drop was directed by Christopher Landon, both very good directors. And they've done bad films this year. It's not been a good track record for Blumhouse Productions, seriously. So, I'm really nervous about The Black Phone 2, seriously. That and Five Nights at Freddy 2. I'm very nervous about the rest of Blumhouse Productions' release schedule this year, seriously. Very nervous. And now, back to the news story, since I've gotten my thoughts out of the way and everything, onto why it failed and why they've been failing this year. Good old Jason Blum gives probably the worst reason why Megan 2.0 failed at the box office. Seriously, I've heard really bad excuses how your film failed and this and that, but this probably takes the cake for why a film failed in a producer's opinion. Now back to the Town podcast. Jason Blum admitted that we all thought Megan was like Superman. We could do anything to her. We could change genres. We could put her in the summer. We could make her look different. We could turn her from a bad guy into a good guy. And we kind of classically overthought how powerful people's engagement was really with her. Wow! You don't say, Jason Blum. That part. And we kind of classically overthought how powerful people's engagement was really with her. Hello? I don't get it. Seriously, when we think of Megan, we think of an evil robot that slashes people. A killer robot along the lines of Chopping Mall and those types of films. Now, to make this ludicrous statement, we thought Megan was like Superman. First of all, Superman has been around for a very, very long time. As it started out as a comic book character, then became popular with films. In fact, the first time the character was published was 1938. The first time Megan came out was in 2022. How can you compare the fact that Megan was like Superman? Or even think we thought she was Superman? How? Seriously? Because I never thought of Superman as a villain per se. Superman has always been a good guy. But I don't get Jason Blum's weird and strange thinking about this. Because that has to be one of the most acidine statements I have ever heard. Literally. I told you this is probably one of the dumbest reasons on why someone thought a film failed. Yeah, that is really one of them. In fact, it's probably one of the worst things a Hollywood executive has ever said. Literally. And this probably is up there for dumbest idea of the year. Comparing Megan to Superman. Seriously. I haven't seen many dumb ideas this year, but this might take the cake as the dumbest idea. Comparing your failure of Megan 2.0 because you thought Megan was Superman. Hello? Megan's a slasher villain. If you kept the slasher route and didn't put this film in the summertime, then it would have probably done a lot better. Instead of throwing it right in the middle of summer where it can get killed easily. And horror's been really good this year. So it was ripe for the picking when you put this film where you put this film at. Because I think this film came out around the time Sinners came out, and that was catching fire. Then Final Destination Bloodlines was catching fire around that time too. I don't get why you put Megan 2.0 in the summertime. That's more like a winter film, if anything. Seriously. I know, you had to put the Wolfman in the winter. It didn't work out. But to compare Megan 2.0 to Superman, it's just very dumb. And Jason Blum literally should have rethought his thoughts on that one. Seriously. I can understand maybe the second part, but the first part, you throw that film right in the middle of summer where you got Fantastic Four First Steps, you got Superman out, you got another Jurassic Park film out. You do not put Megan out during that time period. If you're going to put it in the summer, put it in August. But then again, it probably would have gotten crushed by Weapons, which is killing the box office lately. And to think about it, Warner Brothers is really doing a great job with their horror films this year. They have 3 major horror films. Who would have ever thought that? And I think last year, Warner Brothers had a very bad year. And this year, their horror films, on top of Minecraft and Superman, have really helped the studio rebound. But to really put Megan 2.0 into that murderer's row of films, considering you're doing the changing of genres, considering making her a good guy instead of a bad guy, was a very bad idea. This probably should have been kept to wintertime, quite frankly. It should have sat on a shelf until maybe July, February. Take your chances then. I know you tried that with the Wolfman. It didn't work. But it would have been better suited for that time period. Instead, you just threw it out there into that murderer's row of films. It's never a good idea to throw a film that you overthink in the first place, because they literally thought this was going to be box office dollars since they were doing new things with the character. It doesn't work that way. People like the character for who they are. And they liked Megan because she was a slasher villain, not a good guy. So they really overthought this film, thinking Megan would get over with the public as a good guy. Now, the only way I think you can literally rectify this character seriously, if you really do that dream film that I have always had in my mind, Chucky versus Megan. If that happens, that could be money. Seriously. Because that's kind of a slasher showdown that would probably bring people to the box office. So, it might be a good idea for Jason Blum to get Don Mancini on the phone to see if he wants to do a Chucky versus Megan film. Because unless its spin-off film Soulmate does well, this Megan universe is dead. Because they literally killed it. There's only one way to bring that Megan franchise back, is to have her go up against Chucky. Seriously. That's what they need to do right now. Seriously. Get her back to her roots and have that showdown against Chucky like Freddy versus Jason. That would probably get people to the movie theaters. Seriously. And as for Blumhouse Productions, they really now need the Black Phone 2 and Five Nights at Freddy 2 to be hits. Or else Blumhouse Productions may be in trouble. Seriously. As nothing has gone right this year for Jason Blum. And this is like a rarity. Seriously. When nothing has gone right for Jason Blum. I'm really hoping the Black Phone 2 is very good. The trailer looks very good for this film. So I'm hoping it's very good. Scott Dickerson's back to direct it. It looks very terrifying. Because I kind of first wrote off this film. But this trailer really brought me back into that film. In Five Nights at Freddy 2, you'll probably get a big crowd because there's a huge following for Five Nights at Freddy. If they can get that following back in the theaters for the second film, then the film will succeed. It also helps that film also cast Skeet Ulrich too, reuniting him with Matthew Lillard. So that's also another good ploy, what they did in casting for that film. So you could probably also get the Scream crowd in there too. Because I don't think they've done a film together since Scream. So that might be another selling point for Five Nights at Freddy 2. So that could also help Blumhouse Productions rebound. Because those two films have to change their fortune. Or else this can be a very dismal year for that company. And I don't think I've seen a very dismal year from Blumhouse Productions that I can remember. But to think Megan was our Superman is probably one of the most idiotic statements I have ever heard. I'm sorry. To compare Megan to Superman are two different things. And literally, that is just idiotic when you compare those two. Seriously. And I'm gonna call it out. Just like I did.
Welcome to Dark Discussions, your place for the discussion of horror film, fiction, and all that's fantastic. A weekly podcast where the discussion is about the most recent horror and genre films. Intelligent talk on a genre that deserves intelligence. A conversation between co-hosts discussing not only the film, but also the connotation that the directors and screenwriters are trying to articulate. When you want more than a review, listen to Dark Discussions.
And speaking of perception, there's just one more scene I want to talk about, which is after Caleb discovers that Kyoto's a robot. Kyoto kind of peels off her skin, showing him what's underneath.
Now, wait a minute. I know where you're going with this, but tell me you weren't already thinking this 15 minutes earlier in the film. Exactly what he's thinking at that moment.
Which is he's a robot, too.
Oh, I considered the possibility.
Right, and that's what I like, is the fact that the writers were smart enough to know that this is what the audience would be thinking.
We've all seen Blade Runner.
Right, exactly.
www.darkdiscussions.com, wherever podcasts are found.
Welcome back. Now, The Hollywood Reporter recently announced their top 25 horror films of this century so far. And yours truly, when taking a look at the list, was shocked to see some of the films on this list. Don't get me wrong, there are films that deserve to be on this list, like Get Out, The Host, Train to Busan, films I haven't seen. They deserve to be on this list. But there are some films that I have no idea why they're on this list. Say like Bones and All, or Presence, the new Steven Soderbergh film that was released earlier this year. Don't get me wrong, good film, but not top 25 level. I'm sorry. You also have other films like Under the Shadow, His House, films I've never heard of before until now, literally. Let me run down the top 25 films of the century in the horror genre according to The Hollywood Reporter that has gotten me so pissed off. Number 25, Bones and All. 24, Talk to Me. 23, A Quiet Place. 22, Under the Shadow. 21, His House. 20, Drag Me to Hell. 19, It Follows. 18, Presence. 17, The Invisible Man. 16, Sinners. 15, Saint Maud. 14, The Others. 13, Nosferatu. 12, Us. 11, The Witch. 10, Hereditary. 9, The Conjuring. 8, Pan's Labyrinth. 7, Train to Busan. 6, 28 Days Later. 5, The Host. 4, The Babadook. 3, Let the Right One In. 2, Get Out. And the number one horror movie of this century, according to The Hollywood Reporter, is, wait for it, Under the Skin. What? The Scarlett Johansson film Under the Skin? Sure, I've seen the film. It's an okay film. But that's the greatest horror movie of this century so far? Are you kidding me? You've gotta be kidding me. Seriously. I can understand putting films like Sinners that came out this year, or Nosferatu, but Under the Skin as the number one film of this century in the horror genre. I'm sorry. I can't go there. I'm just so enraged that yours truly decided to do a top 10 list of my favorite horror films of this century. Because I had to do it, seriously. Because these idiots at the Hollywood Reporter have no clue what the best horror film of the century is. I'm sorry. Because you got titles there that do not belong there. And you have other films there that should have been there. I'm surprised The Substance isn't on that list, seriously. Even though it's not on my top 10 list, I would have thought this would be on this list by far, since we're including 2024, 2025 films. Seriously, it's just unreal. Under the Skin as the number one film. But here is my top 10 films. Now on to my top 10 films of this century. Number 10. It came out last year. I know. But it's just such a great vampire film. I think it's one of the best vampire films ever made. And this director is one of two directors that have two films on this list. It's crazy, but it's true. I'm talking about Robert Eggers and his remake of Nosferatu. One of the reasons I really loved about Nosferatu was the fact that this film had it all. It had everything that I would want in a vampire film. It had erotic scenes. It had blood. It had a gothic dark feel to it. It had great performances. It had great cinematography. Plus it had a really good score as well to accompany all of that. It was like almost the perfect horror film, literally. And Eggers really does such a great job with the way he handles that material. Because when the first time I saw this being announced, I thought this was going to fail miserably at the box office. But it didn't, surprisingly. I remember, I think, seeing it the day after Christmas, and it was almost packed. I was not expecting an almost packed house for a 10:30 showing of Nosferatu, but it was. And I was surprised. That was at least half full, 2/3 of the way full. And this is coming from a theater in Rhode Island, nonetheless. And it's not even the capital city of Rhode Island. And it still packed people in. It's a testament to, I think, the promotion of this film, plus the fact that the legacy that the Nosferatu name has, that really made this a great film, plus the fact that Eggers really does a great job in making sure he doesn't screw up the Nosferatu brand or the classic silent film. And it's why I think it's on my list, even though it's from last year. It was a big box office draw. I did not see that happening. I thought they were crazy to do a big budget Nosferatu movie. Boy, was I wrong. Number 9, Malignant, by James Wan, who is the other director that has 2 films on this list. Now, this is a film that was not on the Hollywood Reporter's top 25 list, but it was my favorite film the year it was released. It's directed by James Wan, the creator of Saw. And who would have thought this film would be a great film? Seriously. Going into Malignant, I was expecting maybe a good film, but I was amazed by the film's screenplay, how it was vague, the marketing, everything. And I also loved the fact that this film was twisted and ballsy. It has an insane third act, which really makes this film very good. And I really love the fact that James Wan really got to make a film that he wanted to make. As it proves out, the guy still has talent because he can create great horror films. He's done it time and time again. And Malignant also has some very good performances. And of course, a great screenplay. And it's why I think Malignant is one of the top 10 films of the century. It's a very underrated James Wan film, but people should go back and check that film out, as that is really James Wan's most underrated film. Number 8, It Chapter 1. Now, this was a really good horror film and really deserved to be on that top 25 list of best horror films of the 21st century. Second one was good, but I really thought the first one was just so excellent. It felt like almost a perfect horror film. It did a great job with the way it develops its characters. It does a great job with the blood and gore in the film. It does a great job with the scares. There are some really intense moments in that film that really make you jump out and stand out. You have a great performance by Bill Skarsgård in that film. I'm kind of surprised I did not see that film on that list of the Hollywood Reporter's top 25 films of the 21st century in terms of horror films. Because that is a film that deserves to be on that list. And I just was surprised. This had really good direction. It had good action. It really felt like a great It movie. Second one was good, but it was almost impossible to recapture the magic of the first one, considering the second one had all these big Hollywood stars. This one felt more organic, and it really provided some really horrific moments that is really worth checking out, as I really enjoyed It Chapter 1. And that's why I really put this on this list at number 8, for basically the screenplay and the performance of Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise, as he really does a great job being Pennywise. In fact, he's great in both of those films. So, I'm just surprised It Chapter 1 did not get mentioned. Maybe because of the fact that It Chapter 2 wasn't that good to some people, that it doesn't get mentioned a lot. But I really thought, as a standalone film, It Chapter 1 was an excellent horror film. How did that get ignored on that list? Seriously. That is one of the things I'm not going to be able to figure out, why the Hollywood Reporter didn't put that film on that list. As I couldn't figure out why certain other films weren't on that list, quite frankly, that were way better than Under the Skin. But I digress. Moving on, number 7, The Others. Now, this is a very good supernatural horror film that came out way early in the century, more like 2001, as a couple of films on my list really came out around that time period. It's not a knock to all these newer films. It's just these films have really stood the test of time. As the supernatural horror film, The Others will be 25 next year. It's just a very good film. One of the reasons why I loved this film a lot was the great performance by Nicole Kidman in this film. She does a great job with the way she handles her character. She makes sure that she's on edge throughout the entire film. She also does a really good job making sure she has chemistry with all the other cast in that film as well. The film also really has some good direction, as this is one of those slow burn type of horror films, but that's what you get with these supernatural horror films. The slow burn, as everything has to build up. And this film builds up very good. It keeps your interest throughout the entire film, and it builds all the way right up to its very shocking conclusion. As this is a film where I was literally shocked at the end of the film. Literally. And when you can have a supernatural film that shocks you at the end, you're doing something right. And The Others really does a great job with the way the story was written, the way the ending happened, and of course Nicole Kidman's performance in that film is what really makes The Others a film that really has stood that test of time. Moving on to number 6, Pearl. I know, this is a recent film from 2023. And this really was a great film, as this is really, I think, one of my favorite slashers of the decade. As one of the reasons why I think I really loved Pearl a lot was Mia Goth's performance in this film. As this film was the prequel to X. In fact, Pearl was released second in the whole X trilogy. The first film that was released was X. Then they went back like months later and released Pearl. And I was just so amazed at that film after being very amazed with X and how I loved that film a lot. And Pearl has like the slight edge over X because of a lot of things. It has a great score. The cinematography is great. It has that different feel that you're not accustomed to seeing in a slasher film. This had a like Sound of Music, Wizard of Oz type feel in the way the film looked. And that's just a credit to the cinematographer of this film, as he really nails that time period where Pearl takes place down very pat. And of course, Ty West does a great job with his direction and diving into Pearl's state of mind as she becomes increasingly obsessed during the course of the film. But the main thing coming out of Pearl was Mia Goth's performance, as Mia Goth was just excellent in this film. She really did a great job in making her character very different from the Maxine in X. And it had to be different, because you couldn't do Maxine again. You needed to do something different. And you couldn't do old woman Pearl from X neither. You needed to do something different. Instead, we get to see her descent into madness, how she becomes this psychopath that goes on a rampage. It is just done very well. Ty West really takes his time in developing that character, and it really makes this film very good. And it's also one of those films where it's just great to look at. Because it felt like a film that came out of the golden age of Hollywood, too. Which is kind of rare for a slasher film, quite frankly. And that's why I like the fact that this film was different in terms of style. X was very gritty. Pearl was so colorful. That's what I think made those two films very good, in my opinion. And that's why I think Pearl still sticks out with me a couple of years later. And when coming up with this list, I had to include Pearl on this list at number 6. Let's move on to number 5 in my top 10 films in the 21st century. Number 5, The Conjuring. Now, this is the second film from James Wan on this list. That just shows how great of a director James Wan is. This film was just great from start to finish. I love how it really captures the time period of the film. It really gives that ominous feel to it, which helps, especially when you are doing a film that is based on that time period and based on a famous haunting. You need a film to be very scary, very intense. This film does a great job doing that. Most of it is credit to James Wan's direction here, as he really does a good job keeping the action moving with this film. Another thing that I really loved about The Conjuring a lot was the performances in this film, as Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson were just great in this film. They both had great chemistry with each other. The film also has a really great supporting performance by Lily Taylor in this film. This film really keeps you on edge throughout, through the action and the performances. And it's the reason why I really love The Conjuring a lot. And it is definitely worth being on my top 5 films of the 21st century. Number 4 is another director that has 2 films on this list. I'm talking about Robert Eggers and the film that started his career, The Witch. Now, The Witch is a very supernatural period piece about the Salem witch trials. It takes place around there, and it just really was such a great film from start to finish. It's just one of the things I really loved about this film is the way that Eggers captures everything, whether it's the gloominess of this film, as you really had this dark, ominous feel throughout this film, as this is one of those films where there's a lot of dialogue in it, as there's not really much action until towards the end of the film, but it really kept my interest a lot. Plus, this film also, like The Conjuring, had great performances. In films that have period pieces in horror, you need great performances in order for the film to succeed. And this film has that most definitely, as it has really great performances from Anya Taylor-Joy and Ralph Innes, as both of those 2 actors really did a great job with the way they portrayed their roles. They really kept the material interesting. They really made this film work very well. And it just also had a certain feel to it that Eggers captures that is just so dark right up until its shocking end. And it's really one of those films that it's really still probably my favorite Robert Eggers film, even though Nosferatu is a very close second. But right now it's still The Witch as my favorite Robert Eggers film, but I could see Nosferatu taking over that at some point. But anyway, that's the reason why I put The Witch on this list at number 4. Number 3, 28 Days Later. Yes, that came out at the beginning of the century, pretty much. As I think my top 3 films pretty much came out around the beginning of the century. So, anyway, 28 Days Later recently got a sequel, 28 years later, which lived up to my expectations as my most anticipated film of this year. But anyway, back to the best films of the 21st century, and 28 Days Later at 3. This film came out at 2002. So it's been out for 23 years, pretty much. Around there. It's been amazing that film has stayed long in my conscience. Seriously. But anyway, this really brought new life to the zombie genre. As instead of these slow-moving zombies, these zombies were so intense. They were like crazy, running wild. Loved the insane camera angles that this film has. The way Danny Boyle approaches this film, as this was literally intense from start to finish. I've never seen a zombie film that was so intense and so amped up from start to finish until I saw that film for the first time. Literally. I love how this film really has all these crazy camera angles, the shaky cam, which is worth it in this film. It also helped that this film really had a good story. It had really good performances, including Cillian Murphy in this film, and a great screenplay from Alex Garland, as it really helped launch his career as a screenwriter, as he's done some great films ever since. As he recently did Civil War, Ex Machina, and most recently 28 Years Later, to name a few of some of his really good work over the years. But this is a film that really launched his career into stardom, and it really was such a great zombie film. And I am not a fan of zombie films. That is like one of my least favorite genres. Sure, there's some zombie films that I think are really great films. Films like Dawn of the Dead, the original Dawn of the Dead. The remake was good, but I prefer the original better. That was good. Day of the Dead was really good. Cemetery Man was also a really weird one, but very good zombie film. So, zombie genre is not my type of genre, as I'm more of the slasher type, the supernatural type of person when it comes to horror films, and the psychological type when it comes to horror films. So, if you can really do something great with the zombie genre, and I like it, it's great. Seriously, because that's usually a hard sell for me. So, that's why I put 28 Days Later at 3. It's just a great film, and probably the best zombie film of this century so far. Number 2, and why this was not on this list of the 25 greatest horror movies of this century is beyond me, because I really think this is a horror film. Seriously. Considering the beginning of this film and the end of this film. David Lynch's Mulholland Drive at number 2. Now, this film came out in 2001. That's like right at the beginning of the decade. And 24 years later, almost, it's still one of the best horror films ever made of this decade. And a lot of it is the psychological aspects of it. I know maybe the Hollywood Reporter did not consider this a horror film, but there were things in that film where you could consider this a horror film. That ending to the film, you could have considered this a horror film. You could have considered the beginning scene with the whole cafe sequence and the ending of that sequence as horror. There are scenes in this film where you could consider that this is a horror film. Seriously, people. And I don't know why this did not get on that list. It's such a great movie. It screws with your mind throughout. It has an Eraserhead sense of sensibility to it. It's David Lynch being David Lynch, fooling around with the psychological elements and bringing him right to the edge of horror. I would consider this as a horror film. I know people consider this a mystery thriller, but this is kind of a horror film as well. Because there are some elements of horror in this film. Literally. I just don't get it, people. Really don't get it why this film was not on this list. Because I would have considered this as horror. If you consider Twin Peaks as horror, this has to be considered horror as well. And this just goes to the genius of David Lynch. As I really think this is his best film. Outside of Eraserhead. As he really knew how to do the psychological elements of horror excellently. Like a craftsman. And sadly he passed away this year. Which is a really tragic loss for the world of cinema. As there won't be another David Lynch, period. Seriously. And he's going to truly be missed. Okay, now you're wondering, what is my number one favorite horror film of this decade? Let me run down the top 10 so far. 10, Nosferatu. 9, Malignant. 8, It, Chapter 1. 7, The Others. 6, Pearl. 5, The Conjuring. 4, The Witch. 3, 28 Days Later. 2, Mulholland Drive. And my number one horror film of the 21st century is Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth. Now, this is a film that came out in 2006. And this is a Spanish language film, everyone. This was not an English film out of Mexico. Now, I remember seeing this film when it was in theaters because I really wanted to see this so bad. It had a really great trailer and it really did not disappoint at all. As one of the things that I really loved about Pan's Labyrinth was Guillermo del Toro's writing and directing of this film. As this film does a great job walking the fine lines between fantasy and horror. As there are a lot of really good fantasy elements in this film and a lot of good horror elements in this film. As Del Toro really blends those two genres together very well. He gets great performances from his lead cast. He does a great job really capturing the time period in which this film takes place. As this is set 1944 Spain. It really does a great job capturing that time period. Great cinematography, great score. Probably one of the most underrated villains in horror in Captain Vidal. Because Sergio Lopez gives a great performance in that film. This film literally had everything you want in a horror film. And it also really had this feeling of a special film that you don't see in many other films in this genre, quite frankly. It has that shocking ending. It has everything. Guillermo del Toro does not hold back in what he does with this film. And that's what I really loved about it. The visuals also was very good. I could sit here all day raving about this film, as I still think it is such a great film to this day. And I still consider Pan's Labyrinth the best horror foreign film I've ever seen, and the best foreign film I've ever seen. That just goes to the craftsman of Guillermo del Toro, as he really does a great job with this film. You also had another really good film earlier before Pan's Labyrinth that people should check out, The Devil's Backbone, which was released in 2001. His Spanish films are great films. Seriously, and worth checking out. If you go back to IMDb, in his earlier films are just great films. And he's still the only director that's able to do a proper Hellboy film. As I'm still waiting for another proper Hellboy film after 2 failed attempts. But anyway, all the reasons I said back there, that's why I still think to this day Pan's Labyrinth is the greatest horror film of the 21st century. And this wraps up my list of the top 10 films of the 21st century. If you want to find out the latest news for Anthony T's Horror and Wrestling Show, you can follow the podcast on the Slasher app, Facebook, and Instagram at Anthony T's Horror and Wrestling. You can also listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, DarkDiscussions.com, and the Film Arcade Media YouTube channel at youtube.com/FilmArcadeMedia. What film is Anthony T watching this episode? Well, Anthony T is watching a film that got Jordan Peele's management team fired. That's right. A management team got fired because they could not obtain the script for a film that I'm about to review called Weapons. Yeah, that film that's been tearing up the box office. You can see why Jordan Peele fired his management team over this film. Because he probably took a look in that script and he saw dollar signs. He thought that script was great. And looking at the box office it's made so far, he was right. Because literally, that film was a subject of a bidding war. Very rare you get these bidding wars in Hollywood for a screenplay. But this was one of those screenplays that ended up in a bidding war, which Warner Brothers ultimately won. So, they were the lucky studio that got to release Weapons under their New Line Cinema label. And this has been a film that has been anticipated ever since the first trailer for this film dropped. And the fact it was so creepy. It is directed by Zach Cregger, director of the film Barbarian, aka a film that's being held hostage by Disney. Where's the Blu-ray release for Barbarian, Disney? Seriously. You guys can release Prey, but you can't release Barbarian. Now with Weapons success, why don't you release Barbarian on Blu-ray? Please. It'd be a good time to release this film on Blu-ray finally, instead of being held hostage on Hulu. Because I don't get why this film was not released on Blu-ray when Weapons came out. They probably could have made money off this film in home media. I know you're trying to drive your Disney Plus subscribers, but people want home media still, like me. But anyway, back to Weapons. Now this is a film that has an all-star cast, including Julia Garner, who was seen in The Wolfman earlier this year, Josh Brolin, who is most notable for Avengers Endgame and Infinity War. You have Benedict Wong, most notable for Doctor Strange. And you have Amy Madigan, who's most notable for films such as Streets of Fire, Field of Dreams, and many more films. Now she's got probably, I think, around 90 films to her credit from all those years. So, this was a film I was looking forward to. Now, before I go into the review, I have to go to IMDb to read the plot synopsis, even though this is a Hollywood film. The film's about when all but one child from the same class mysteriously vanish on the same night at exactly the same time. A community is left questioning who or what is behind the disappearance. This is one of those weird films, seriously, because the first half of the film plays out as a serious film. Then the last half of the film goes into more bonkers territory, literally. So what did I think about Weapons? I have to say, this was a great film from start to finish, literally. As this is probably right now my favorite film of 2025. I was just amazed at how great this film was. And it's truly, the credit of it, a lot of it has to go to Zach Krieger, who does an excellent job with everything in this film, literally. He really has matured as a director. If you thought Barbarian was crazy, this is even crazier. Seriously. And I thought this was just very good. One of the things I really liked about this film was this screenplay. This screenplay felt different. You could see why there was a major bidding war on this screenplay, as Krieger does a really good job with the way he spends his time developing his characters in the film. I love the fact that it just tells the film through different narratives, through different sets of eyes of characters. It gives you the different feel that you're not accustomed to seeing in a horror film, literally. Because I don't think I remember seeing a horror film where you're focused on one character for about 15-20 minutes. Then you're focused on another character for about 10-15 minutes. And another one, and so on. I loved the structure of this film. This isn't the typical horror structure. And that is good when a director-writer does that. Because one of the things that I love is originality, everyone. Be creative. Think outside the box. This screenplay is outside the box for a horror film. It does not follow the traditional formula for a horror film. It doesn't follow the formula for a supernatural film. It doesn't follow the formula for any type of horror film. As those are the types of films I want to see in the horror genre. Seriously. You need more of that, and we're seeing more and more of that. And another thing I liked that we're seeing more of is more mature stories. Ones rooted in storytelling, ones rooted in character, focus-driven films. These aren't the films you saw in the 80s and 90s. Today, these films are much more smarter, as these films are acting like regular films, literally, with the way they tell their stories and the way they tell their characters. You don't have these stupid characters anymore. A lot of these characters have been mature. Look at Bring Her Back. That's another one that had characters that had all mature like characters. Or films like Late Night with the Devil, or with some of the Hell House films. A lot of these films are getting more and more mature, horror-wise. That's what I'm seeing, and that's a good thing. Seriously, I didn't think it would ever be a good thing, but it is. Because it's being serious too while sticking to the hardcore elements of horror. And that's always a good thing. Sure, I love my Terrifiers and my Halloweens and my Nightmare on Elm Street type films. But these films I love even more because it allows a lot of things to happen. And this screenplay really does a good job doing that in a mature way, literally. Obviously, you do get some absurd moments in this film. But for the first 30-40 minutes, it felt like a mature film. And that's a credit to Zach Krieger and his writing for that first half hour, 45 minutes or so. It shows he can also be a mature writer too, amidst the absurdity, which the third act is, pretty much. Once we get to that third act, it becomes bonkers, literally, in a good way. And that works very well because it spent the time developing every character of importance. I thought Krieger's direction was great in this film. I think Krieger does a very good job here making sure he gets the performances he needs. As there are some really good performances in this film. Definitely by Julia Gardner, Josh Brolin, and especially Amy Madigan as Gladys, the aunt, as the nutty Aunt Gladys, who a lot of people take away from this film. Is that performance. That performance is great. Even though it's most of it happens during the absurd part of this film. It's just great, literally. She made her character stand out. And it's a supporting performance. It's probably the best supporting performance I've seen all year so far, literally. It's just so great. It just stands out. Every scene she's in, she takes command of the screen. And that's what a good supporting performance is. An actor who has maybe like 15 minutes of screen time, but is in every scene and makes every minute of it count, really helps make the character. When you do that as a supporting actor, you're taking this film to another level, as you are making this film more better. You're keeping people interested in the film, and you're also making the story very good and enhancing it. It's just a great film, seriously. Amy Madigan should get a supporting actress nomination out of this role, seriously. It's just that good. If you take that performance out of this film, you're missing something. Seriously. It's just one of those things where you take an actor or actress out of a film and they're not there, it goes down a bit. With her presence in that film and the way she portrayed that character, she should get an Oscar nomination, seriously. If we're talking about sinners getting Oscar nominations, I really think Weapons should definitely get some Oscar nomination talk too. Because the reviews have been excellent for this film, going into this film. So, literally, in fact, I can also probably make a case for Best Original Screenplay as well. Because I literally think the screenplay is just excellent. But anyway, the acting's just so great. This chemistry that is just so great with everyone in the main cast. It's probably the best ensemble cast I've seen all year so far. As Weapons has literally surpassed 28 years later as the best film of the year, literally. And I thought it would have been tough to do for that. But Weapons, I think, made that very easy. It has the complete package. This is one of those rare films that has the complete package. Great directing, great writing, great editing, great screenplay. I just said that again, but it's definitely worth noting. Great performances. Most horrific scene of the year so far. That's there as well. This film has everything, literally. And this is one of those films that lives up to its hype. This is one of those films that got people fired for not buying this screenplay. Because this screenplay is just excellent, literally. It's probably the best horror screenplay this year. There's probably not going to be another horror screenplay like this, seriously. And literally. And you can see why there was such a bidding war for this film. This film is great. This film was given the complete freedom that it had. Because that's probably what it would have took to get you that film, literally. Zach Krieger having creative control and final cut. Because literally, this film, it's just bonkers. That third act is probably the most bonkers third act you will see all year, literally. And you can see again why people wanted this film so bad. You can see why studios wanted this film so bad. You can see why production companies wanted this film so bad. Because it's a great screenplay. The way it was written, plus that insane third act, is what really makes Weapons a great film. And it probably gives you the best kill scene of the year so far as well. Who would have thought a serious film, or somewhat serious film, would give you the best kill scene of the year? Who would have thought that? Seriously. But then again, this is Zach Krieger. And he's just a great director. He did it with Barbarian, and he did it once again with Weapons. As you definitely need to see this film in theaters. it's deserving of its $100+ million it's already made at the U.S. box office. Literally, it's just a great film, everyone. And this is why I think it's right now almost a lock that this will probably be my best film of 2025. I still have to see Sinners. I have not seen that. I admit that. I have not seen Final Destination Bloodlines. I admit that. But I don't think any other film's going to top that from a complete film standpoint. So definitely check out Weapons. It's a great horror film that we will be talking about 10, 15, 20 years from now. 5 stars. I'm hoping the next episode isn't a while between episodes. Seriously. As I'm really hoping to get another one out, hopefully beginning of October. That would be a good time to at least get one episode out. So that's the plan right now in regards to this podcast. Maybe early October for the next episode. Targeting that date. So I will get to work probably almost right away. Maybe a couple days after this drops, I'll start work on the next episode. But in the meantime, don't forget to check out past episodes of Anthony T's Horror Show over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, and other podcast providers. You can also listen to the show on YouTube at youtube.com/FilmArcadeMedia. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Facebook and Instagram page at Anthony T's Horror. With that, I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. Have a good day. Support indie horror. This has been a Film Arcade Media production.